to the MedTech Talent Accelerators Explore MedTech Innovation Seminar. My name is Jesse Ehrlich. I'm the McGill Program Manager for the MedTech Talent Accelerator. It is my great pleasure to bring to you our guest speaker today, Gennadi Saiko, who is an Adjunct Professor at the Department of Physics, Faculty of Science at Toronto Metropolitan University. Today, he will present a talk addressing bringing a medical device to the market, a scientist's perspective. Before we begin, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. So McGill University is on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. We acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose presence marks this territory on which peoples of the world now gather. Gennadi, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. So let me start sharing my screen. Okay, hello, everyone. Good afternoon, Eastern Canada. Good morning, Western Canada, if anybody from Western Canada. So my name is Gennadi Saiko. As Jesse said, I am a Adjunct Professor at Toronto Metropolitan University, but I combine my academic career with industrial experience. So, and what I want to share today with you a little bit, what I wish I knew before kind of jumping into this area. A couple core concepts which are maybe unusual for people just from a school. But I mean, you need to be prepared, and in this case, you will be better prepared for the future. So, but before we get started, so let me start with a story. It's my personal story, and I may maybe refer to this story later in the talk, but it's just summarize to some extent what's going on into this field. So the story is that at some point in my career, it was 2017, so I thought about raising money from angels investors. So to do that, I asked my friend to invite me to angels meetings they have every month or something like that. So just to see what's how to pitch to them, to just understand the kind of environment. And so I've been on a couple of these meetings. So, and on the first meeting, I kind of already made a decision. So what I saw there, so I just show you one example. So a gentleman present to the angels, who probably around 100 people sitting to the room. And what is he saying? That I'm a music records executive with 20 years of executive experience in this field. I have own studio. I work with a couple labels. And what we're looking for develop some app which help with recording artists. So what I'm asking you for $100,000. The app will be on the market in 3 months. And I have a personal connection with Kanye West and a couple other guys. It will get endorsed by Kanye West, and we will get a break-even point in approximately 1 year. After that, I will start returning your money. And everybody kind of applauding. It's quite interesting presentation. And for me, it was kind of a lightning strike. So what I can offer to this audience. So what I can tell you guys that I'm looking for 500,000. I will be on the market with a medical. I will be pass-through regulator in 3 years. I start my sales in 4 years, and maybe after 5 or 6 years, I will get break even and start returning your money. So obviously, it's a no-brainer that it's not going to fly. So this way, kind of I stopped that idea to raising money from angels, but I have a couple of immediate questions from that point. So I'm a lousy businessman. Is it poor business model? What I'm doing? What is wrong with me? And so this is will be kind of this is what we will talk about. So let me start sharing. What is our scope of our today discussion? It's brief info about myself, why I think that I might be qualified to talk about that. And we will talk a little bit about US regulatory environment and what I call pillars or prerequisites to that regulatory approval: quality management, risk management, safety certifications, and performance testing. So a little bit about myself. So I got a PhD in theoretical physics. Then I started working in biooptics while doing career in finance industry. In 2014, I decided to stop my quite successful industrial career in finance. At that point, I was director of product management, Toronto Stock Exchange. And I went as a postdoc to Ryerson University. In 2016, it was a spin-off from my postdoc project, and I started a company. It's called Oxilight. And in 2016, 2018, we developed a multispectral imaging technology for wound care. In 2019, I sold this technology to Swift Medical. And in 2022, Swift Medical launched this technology as Ray-1. And so this is our initial device, which we developed in 2017. It was something like this size. But I came with that device proudly with that device to Symposium on Advanced Wound Care. This is the biggest wound care event in the world. And what I found, so there are a couple competitors in this space, and no way I can do something with it. So we decided, so immediately in 2017, we decided to pivot and miniaturize it. And so this is results. So this is what I call 100 times smaller and 100 times cheaper. It's kind of fit. So this is Ray-1, which is fit on a smartphone camera. So what is about my journey? Couple things. So I went from theoretical physics to applied physics, and now I'm doing mostly engineering. And the second one, my comment would be, in 2016, when I started to do it, I thought that it would take me 3 years. It's actually, if you look from this map, it took me 6 years to get to the market. And this is another question. So I am is it standard, or is it I'll have a lousy business model or something like this? So now let's dig into some details. So this is some statistics. It's approximately 10 years old, but I mean, it's still pretty relevant. So even if we talk about 510K submission, which I explained what is this all about, it takes multiple stages, and each stage is 1 or more years. So that's why overall process, it's approximately 6 years. So I would say it's a long process, and actually it's quite expensive. So this is average 6 years. It's another study, and it took on average $25 million to bring device to the market. So I underestimated approximately twice. So instead of 3 years, it took 6 years. But I mean, 6 years, I would say it's on a par with industry standard. So why is it long and expensive? As you may already alluded from my talk, it's because it's a heavy regulated industry. So you may say that what's different with medical devices? For example, financial industry, it's also a regulated industry. That's right. You can't. Why I can compare this industry? Because I was in financial industry for 10 years. And actually, one of my positions was I was chief compliance officer at a stock trading company. So that's why I know how regulated this industry is. And I can tell you it's nothing compared with medical device industry. The reason is pretty much simple. So you definitely cannot launch a bank or something like when you take people's money from your garage. But if you want to develop something for traders or for the bank, some tool or something, it's not regulated at all. So this is people doing on a daily basis, and you can go to market in a matter of days. So you can have a good app or something and kind of people start using it immediately. And this is not the case with the medical devices. This is pretty much the same. So we do tools for medical professionals, but we are heavily regulated. Let's switch to what is regulatory framework and why it's needed. So most countries have a specialized government agency which is responsible for protecting public health. And to ensure...
Sorry, Gennadi, the slides are not moving.
No? You don't see?
We see only the first slide.
Okay, so let me, in this case, do you see right now?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So yeah, in this case, let me postpone that so I will go this just like that, yeah. So in most cases, government agency, so to ensure safety, efficacy, and security, government agency regulate marketing and sales of drugs, biological products, and medical devices. And medical devices are part of this regulation. So obviously, kind of most probably of countries have regulators. So in Canada, it's Health Canada, but probably the most known agency is FDA. And further, we will talk about mostly FDA. The reason why FDA, US market is the biggest in the world. I don't remember specific, but it's 40 to 60% in different groups overall med dev market. And here in Canada, I would say most startup consider as first market, US as the first market. So that's why kind of it's has quite a big relevance here. So what is a medical device? A medical device, according to FDA, and it's, I will skip some part of this definition, but so this definition, first of all, it's differentiate between biologic drugs and medical devices. So I just highlighted what is relevant to medical devices, but intended for the use in diagnostic or cure, mitigate, treatment, or prevention of the disease in man or other animal. So this is kind of strict definition, and how regulated it. It's, I would say, in each country, slightly different regulation. It's pretty much aligned between multiple countries, maybe 80 or 90% of overlap, but I mean, they are quite different. And the US market is very different, for example, from Europe or Canada. So all regulatory agencies across the world, so they use so-called risk-based approach. What does it mean? It means that they can't do the same due diligence for each device, whether it's scalpel or MRI machine. So that's why kind of they assess the risk of each device and apply their limited resources to look at this kind of with appropriate risk. So, for example, US, they have 3 classes of devices. Class 1 is the simplest devices with very small risk, and class 3 is quite significant risk. And so class 1, it's something like scalpel. So definitely scalpel can do, or a surgical knife can do harm to the human, but it's pretty much the same as any knife or something like that. So there is nothing specific about that. So that's why it's just subject to general control. But if you are talking about something implantable, like pacemaker, or X-ray machine, something like that, it may pose significant risk to the patient. So that's why kind of it's heavily regulated. And just give you a little bit statistics here. For 47% of medical devices, they are class 1, 43 it's class 2, and just 10% is class 3 medical device. Class 2 is obviously something in between. It's a little bit more stringent requirements than general controls, so it's called special controls, but it's not as strict regulations as class 3 devices. And so to get to the market, we have multiple pathways. So there are 3 primary pathways. So there is exempt device, a pre-market notification, and pre-market approval. So you can think that it's actually class 1 device, exempt, class 2 device pre-market, and class 3 device, it's pre-market approval. But it's not exactly the same. I would say it's quite close. It's probably covers 90% of cases. But so there are some non-overlaps between class 1 and class 2 devices. For example, exempt devices can be class 1 and some of class 2. And what is exempt device in general? So exempt device is the standard way to enter to the market. You need to file pre-market submission. And exempt device, it just means that it is exempt from pre-market submission. So most of class 1 devices and some class 2 devices, so they fall into that exempt market. But typically, class 2, it's pre-market, or commonly known as 510K, and class 3, it's PMA. And you may hear from multiple sources something like registered, cleared, approved. And the question is it the same, or what is not the same? So maybe, some people probably know, like Desmond, but I would say if you want to remember something from this seminar, I would say to get familiar with this definition. So these words are quite loaded, and they mean completely different things for people. Registered, it stands for exempt device. It's only, in this case, this is very simple procedure. So you just need to kind of file something, and there is very simple documentation, and you don't need to go through FDA review. Cleared, it means that device was passed through 510K. So in this case, it's not endorsed by FDA, but I mean, they are okay with that submission. And only class 3 with pre-market PMA, pre-market approval, it's approved. So again, it's a big difference. Registered is exempt device, cleared is 510K, and approved is pre-market approval is just for reserved for class 3 devices. But US, as you may think, it's not always as simple. Other than these 3 primary pathway, so there are multiple additional pathway. For example, there is de novo. What is de novo? If you maybe remember a couple slides here, So the class 3 is graded risk or insufficient information exists. So keyword here is insufficient. So if they think that information is insufficient, but I mean, it's perceived as a little bit less risky device, so you can use so-called de novo pathway. It's simplified significantly, and it's decrease the time and the cost overall approval. In addition to that, there are a couple more, for example, emergency use authorization. So this is very popular right now, especially during that COVID. So multiple devices pass that way. It's very simplified procedure. It's much more stringent requirements than anything else. But what is it? It's actually temporary. If pandemic will be over and it will be declared is over, in this case, you can't use your devices anymore. So in this case, you need to, for example, for temporary basis, you can apply for this emergency use authorization. But in the long term, you need to go with something like either de novo or PMI or something like that. So humanitarian device exemption is another interesting stuff. So if you're working in a rare disease case, which affect, for example, less than 10, as far as I remember, less than 10,000 patients in the United States. So in this case, it's definitely a kind of using all the standard pathway will be not possible because this is very prohibitively expensive. To simplify procedure, so they have this HDE pathway, but this applies just for very limited cases, very rare disease. And in this case, it's also have quite interesting application. So with other market pathway, you can go anywhere in the United States. With HD, you need to go with, so you need to file HD with any specific hospital or hospital system. So for example, if you got Johns Hopkins on board, so you can't do the same stuff with something else. So you need to apply for some, for example, New York University or something like that. And then quite recently, they came up with a different approach for breakthrough devices. What breakthrough device? It's something very cool. For example, breakthrough device, it's Neuralink by Musk. And what is this interesting about that? It's get, I would say, immediate attention, people on a very high level, almost on a level of head of FDA. So in this case, it's high-profile cases, and they are definitely kind of very expedited and very. So you may think that it's mostly applicable for Neuralinks or some guys like funded by billionaires, but the good thing, it's not the case. Actually, we have a pretty good example here in Canada. Caravista Health. This is a relatively small company from Kingston, Ontario. It's spin-off from Queen's University. So they just got a month ago. So they got breakthrough designation for their first non-invasive point-of-care diagnostic solution for patients with suspected pulmonary hypertension. So you can do it. It seems that it's possible even without kind of that high-profile publicity. So we talk a little bit about this pathways and everything, but this is kind of pinnacle of the medical device process. So this is called regulatory approval or clearance or registration. But to get there, you need to pass through this pre-regulatory phase, which kind of have 4 pillars. It's like a quality management system, risk management, EMC safety certifications, and performance testing. And this is overall, these 2 phases, regulatory phases and these pre-regulatory phases. So this is completely new, which is not present in any other devices. And this is what complicates a path to the market significantly. So there are other factors. Once you will be closer to the market, so you need to think about reimbursement and everything. But I mean, even to get to the point of start marketing your device, so you need to do all this work here. And so let's talk about these pillars. So let's start with the quality management. Quality management system, it's applicable for companies involved in one or more stages of medical device. But look at this definition. So it's including design, development, production, storage, distribution, installation, servicing, and final decommissioning. And and provisioning associated activities. So like technical support. So actually everything you can think of. So in this case, related to medical devices, you need to have a quality management system. And all these pillars, as I said, so they add complexity, they add time, and they add a lot of money into that. For example, even to implement this quality management system, so typically you need to look for a consultant, and it will be a lot of money from outside, plus you need to train people, you need to audit, so it's quite extensive requirements you need to go through. So in most countries, QMS requirements are based on ISO 13485 standard, for example, in Canada. But in the US are different. So they have so-called good manufacturing practice, which is quite close to that ISO 13485 standard, but it's still different. So that's why kind of, if you work for, if your product, if you think about marketing your product in several countries, so you just need to adjust to the specific requirements for each country. And Canadian requirements and US requirement will be slightly different. So what is quality management approach. So quality management is a process based. And what is a process? Any activities that receive input and converted output is considered a process. So organization need to document all processes which they have. Not all of them as a part of quality management system, but for example, procurement or it's a part. So that's why kind of you need to implement this system in place. And the quality management is expected to be risk based. What it means that again, the more risk your product poses to patient or to user, so in this case you need to pay more attention to this activity. And quality management regulations, so they define a couple stages, like we start from a user needs, they needs to be converted in design input, then design process, design output, and final medical device. But in addition to that, you need to do a verification. Verification means that it's your design outputs, it's cohesive with design inputs. So this is design what you design what you kind of wanted. But more important, it's validation that it's that medical device is actually fit user needs. So this is even more important concept. And each stage of this process needs to be design review. So management review need to participate. But the main point of the system, everything needs to be documented. It needs to be documented, stored properly. So if there is no record, so in this case, you don't have a proof of activity. So there is no, such activity was not performed. Let's switch to risk management. Risk management, here it's a little bit simpler. So there is international standard ISO 14971 and is applicable to kind of most country. Again, so there are some country specific, but this standard is quite interesting. It doesn't have a specific requirement at all. So instead, it's explained general requirements, expectations, and stages of risk management process. In this case, you can design even two companies in the same space, they can design completely different risk management process. So what is a core concept of risk management? It's two things. It's a hazard and the risk. So what is hazard? It's a potential source of harm, and it's characterized by two things. It's severity and probability. And the risk is a combination of likelihood of this occurrence, its probability, and the harm or the severity of that harm. So, and the risk needs to be analyzed, evaluated, and managed. So this is kind of never-ending process: analyze risk, evaluate risk, control risk, monitor, and but this can be iterative. And if the residual risk is higher than accepted criteria, so you need to control needs for to be designed and implemented. And so this is very context specific. So you can't buy the system from off the shelf because it needs to be fit exactly into your context. For example, let's consider some very hypothetical example here, like tornado, how to save people from tornado. So in general, so it depends on the context. For example, in high Arctics, you don't expect that people will be affected by tornadoes. So probably if you operate your business in a high Arctic, probably it's not applicable to you. So you can put as risk negligible. But if you're somewhere in this tornado belt in the US, probably it's maybe pretty big. And so, for example, one way to mitigate it, probably people there are already aware of all this tornado and everything. But I mean, new people who are coming to the area, so they are maybe not aware and they may not behave properly. So what you can do, so you can evaluate that kind of newcomer who is coming to the airport may be affected by this tornado if they're not prepared for that. Maybe you, so you elevate it, so there is a risk of that. So how you can control this risk? For example, you can just educate people. So you can have a billboard or something like that to educate people near airport that pay attention to that. So don't stay don't stay in the middle of a tornado or something like that. And yeah, after that, for example, you just monitor that. Is your activity prevented that risk, so nobody affected? If not, so in this case, you need to repeat. And for example, you may need to come up with some other ideas how to approach it. But I mean, in general, though, there are several layers of risk mitigation. So a preferable way is by design. So to design something that it's not pose risk at all. So it may be also risk controls, which kind of prevent some of this risk. And the least desirable way, but I mean, in some cases it's still possible, it can be user education. So you can put, first of all, you need to put it explicitly on a label, what kind of risk is that? And you can instruct user how to avoid it. So kind of user education, and so this is how it can be prevented. So next pillar is EMC and safety certification, and this is pretty big and pretty big chunk of work which needs to be done. So medical devices, they need to be safe and efficient. And we will talk about what is safe and efficient, may have other applications. But in general, there are multiple standards which address the safety. And electromagnetic compatibility testing, it's called EMC, and electrical safety are essential safety tests for any electrical medical device, and they need to be conducted at its certified testing facility. So I put this block here. It's because this type of test needs to be run in a certified testing facility, because next topic will be performance testing, and it can be done in your lab. But EMC and safety needs to be done in a certified testing facility. And so there are a bunch of, as I told, there are a bunch of standards here. The basic standard is so-called 6601-1, and it's medical electrical equipment, part 1, general requirements for basic safety and essential performance. It's pretty extensive document, but in addition to that, there are a lot of other relevant collateral standards, numbered something like 6601-1- some other number. For example, if you have usability, it will be -1-6, or if you have a home use, and home use is quite broad definition. For example, it's not just by user patient. If your nurse coming to the home and use it in a home environment, it's still considered as home use. And this is 6601-1-11. For home use, it's much more stringent than base standards for medical facilities. So what is EMC certification? EMC certification is a test electrical and system ability to function acceptably in the electromagnetic environment. And all electrical devices needs to be tested to EMC. Two parts here, it's radio frequency interference, that your device doesn't produce kind of harmful interference, which kind of impose other devices, for example, in our room or somewhere else. So it's quite stringent requirement. But more importantly, it's immunity, that the device can function correctly in the presence of radio frequency, so for other nearby radios here. The safety certification, in addition to EMC, which is kind of needs to pass everybody. Safety certification, electric safety, it's also applicable to all electrical devices, and they evaluate potential risk of electrical shock to customer, which you use the product. Also, I would say every medical device needs to pass usability 6601-1-6. But in any particular case, you will be subject to many other standards. For example, if you have a battery, any rechargeable battery, so you need to pass this 62133 certification, or you can buy pre-certified battery with If you have a laser source, it's 661-2-22. If not laser, for example, LED or something, or halogen lamp, it's 257. And any light source, it needs to pass through photobiological safety. This is ES 624671. So in general, I would say for any medical device, in addition to that, to essential like 661-1 and usability-1-6, typically you need at least 2 or 3 for something else, because if you have alarm, you have a standard. If you have a battery, you have a standard. So a lot of things they have a standard, so that's why kind of you need to be aware of all of this. And the final piece is performance testing. So as I already mentioned in previous EMC safety, certain performance testing must be performed to ensure a medical device safety and effectiveness. And this results needs to be demonstrated to regulators. So safety is mostly addressed in the safety testing. But I mean, it's maybe some clinical testing for safety as well. But I mean, for diagnostic device or some simple cases, so safety can be addressed in the safety testing in the previous section. But to demonstrate effectiveness, you need to perform performance testing. And performance testing is also very kind of broad topic. So it can roughly be split in 2 pieces. It's non-clinical laboratory studies and clinical investigation. The good thing is that not all pre-market submissions require clinical studies. Just less than even 10% of 510K submission require clinical data. That's a good thing. However, all PMA de novo submission will almost certainly require clinical data. So that's why kind of it's pretty big chunk of work required here. Non-clinical laboratory studies refer to a couple things. So what is, you can do non-clinical bench performance testing, obviously something on your bench, but recently it's getting more and more important to human factors. So your device needs to be tested with a relevant, very relevant audience. If it's meant to be used by doctors, you need to provide evidence that you tested it with some number of doctors, and they are kind of okay with all this your user interface and everything. So if you have so for performance data, you may also need to include animal studies, or if you're in in vitro diagnostic space, so it's it's in vitro diagnostic performance characteristics can be also done. And but the interesting question is, so we have non-cleared device, non-cleared or not approved device, but we need the data for the regulator. So how we can conduct the clinical testing? So I would say this is to some extent chicken and egg problem. You need the data to get approved, but you need to get approved to get data. So fortunately, there is you can break this cycle, and so there is so-called investigational device exemption (IDE), which is allow investigational, not legally marketed device to be used in a clinical study in order to collect safety and effectiveness data. And in the United States, there are 2 interesting cases. So there is significant risk study. So if we're talking about, for example, some implants, or it's called significant risk study. In this case, you need to go through FDA to get it, and it may take quite a long. It's would be maybe a year or something in consideration. But there is another interesting case. It's called non-significant risk study. So, for example, if you're looking for diagnostic solution or something, so in this case, it's not obviously it's not as serious for may hurt a patient or something. So in this case, you don't need to go to FDA. So you may got approved IRB from some hospital or some university, and if they consider it as a non-significant risk, so in this case it's much lower hurdle, so you can clear it in a couple months. And this is good about US, because in Canada you need to go to Health Canada in any case. Significant risk or non-significant risk, I don't remember, but we don't have probably this definition here. But in Canada, for anything you need to go for Health Canada. But in US, for non-significant risk studies, you can go directly to the hospital or to university. And this is conclude my presentation. And so this is a little bit plug here. So I just published a book on that topic. It's it's exactly as calls the topic of that seminar, bringing a medical device to the market, scientist perspective. And you can find this book on that website. There is a link to publisher. Or so it's kind of my journey and what I found about during this journey. So it's a bunch of useful information for multiple markets. So, but I mean, guys, I'm more than open to to get connected with you and help you if you need. So follow me on Twitter, join me on a LinkedIn, and if you have a question, so yeah, I definitely can spend some time with you if necessary. So thank you very much. It's pretty much conclude my presentation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gennadi. So now we will turn to the audience for a question and answer period. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat or to even unmute yourself and just ask straight away. We do have one question in the chat already, which is an interesting one from Eben. So the question is, what about machines like Dr. Ho? Not sure if you're familiar with that one, which are commercially available, but not approved by the FDA. What pathway would they likely take?
Yeah, in this case, it's pretty much simple. So there are so-called health. So there are a couple things here. So there is so-called health tech. Health tech is not subject of FDA regulations. So if you have some general like machine for the gym or something like that, so it's not definitely it's not regulated. So, but I mean, there is kind of this pretty straightforward definition here: diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention. So potentially something it can be mitigation or treatment, but I mean, in many cases, so they kind of use it quite, I would say loosely. So if it's not pose kind of risk to a customer, so they may consider it as a health tech. And traditional medicine, probably it's also can be considered as a, so they have a concept of so-called so there is some time, I don't remember which year exactly, but I mean, everything which was before that year, it may be, and it was introduced to the market before that, so it may be considered as safe to use, because there are a bunch of devices from traditional medicine which is used for 100 years already, so they definitely needs to go through regulatory clearance for that. So probably like that, but I mean, I'm not familiar with that particular device.
Excellent, thank you.
And one more actually point to that. And actually, a lot of manufacturer, both on the medical device side and on a pharma side, not on the pharma, but I mean this is biological. So they are in a gray area. So they actually go to the market and in kind of without any registration, because for example you will not get this registration, but in a hope that they will not get caught, or kind of FDA will not pay for that, pay attention for that one. So it's a lot of devices. Occasionally Health Canada catch this type of devices, and biologic pretty much the same with FDA, but I mean it's a gray area. It's the lower risk, the lower possibility to get attention from FDA. But if you have a significant health hazard or something, so in this case, ultimately you will get caught by FDA or Health Canada.
Okay, perfect. So still welcoming questions from the crowd. I'll have one. I could ask one in the meantime. So
Sure.
we do have a lot of researchers and innovators in the audience and students as part of our program. What advice would you give them to not only innovate, but to commercialize a medical device from their research?
I would say there are a couple, it's the whole book about that actually. But I mean, to condense it in a couple of words, I would say, first of all, it's a really rewarding experience, but it's a long experience and it's required a lot of stamina. So that's why kind of perseverance, I would say it's number one advice. So don't expect that it will be quick gig. So you will not get rich in 3 years. That's almost sure not. Potentially, it may happen, but I mean, it's most likely kind of 99.9%. It's not going to happen. So you need to be prepared for quite a long stint, maybe 6 years or something like that, even to get to kind of to the decent level. So perseverance is a must. In the medical devices, it's a must.
Okay, very good. And what could you say about the networking that's required to commercialize a device? So what kind of important people are in your network that help you? And how can you advise our students to expand their networks to involve?
Yeah, network is in this, it's paramount. This is kind of, you can't, yeah, it's a paramount. So how I do it, I go to conferences. So my advice to go to conferences. It can be as very specific to your kind of niche and a little bit broader, but I mean on a conference, especially kind of in that receptions and everything, when you can rub a shoulder with a bunch of people. So this is excellent way to do. So first of all, you understand, you will see who is in your area looking at this presentation. You can grab the attention, kind of pose a good question, attract the attention. So yeah, it's my recommendation, go to the conferences and industry event as much as possible.
Very good. And I'll just keep asking questions away if others don't submit. So we have a lot of students who are interested in careers in academia or careers in industry, and you seem to balance both. So I might ask, what is your best advice or tips for how to do that? How do you manage your time, and how do you balance those two?
I would say first of all, speaking of device, unless you have a very clear kind of funding and everything, so stay in academia as long as possible. So in academia, to get money to fund your stuff is much easier than on an open market. And I explain you what's actually going on in an open market. So you'll compete for money with kind of cryptocurrencies and with everything else. So it's hard. So that's why kind of in Canada and US, a bunch of grants for, especially for academia. So in this case, use these grants as much as possible and stay as long as possible under this academic umbrella. So that's why kind of it's much easier, and you have a credibility. Kind of academia give you a little bit more credibility than some guys in the garage or something, especially, which is important in a medical device world for sure. So that's why I would say don't jump immediately on a first idea. So stay as long as possible. So you probably can combine academic career with entrepreneurship, because it's kind of pretty long process. I don't recommend to definitely be CEO and a professor or something. So this is quite both jobs are quite demanding. But if you can combine it with a little bit less activity on the other side. So in this case, kind of combining these two roles, plus having some money from other work like in academia or something. So this can be helpful because you will not have immediately money, so it will be difficult to fund to some extent. So that's why kind of keeping a day job will be kind of quite helpful.
Okay, very good. We do have a question from the crowd, Shiyu. So if we have a patented hemostasis material that's made by FDA approved ingredients and its usage is for bleeding control and external use, what pathway will be needed for that kind of device?
So this is, no, I can't answer this question. So the standard way to do it, how you go to the FDA. So there are so-called product codes. So this is three letters, for example, MUD. So oximeter will be MUD or something like that. So, and you're looking for a specific device for this. So there are a couple of ways to do it. First of all, you can just FDA website is pretty much useful tools, or a bunch of useful tools actually. So you can search a lot of things here, and so such as this is government agencies, so they provide a lot of information, free databases and everything. So you can find, if you can find existing code, product code. In this case, it will be easy because in this product code, it will be explicitly stated what class of the device is. So if it's class 2, so in this case, most likely it will be 510K. If it will be class 3, so you need to go through this PMA. But what is more interesting, so if you don't find anything, so in this case, your options are actually two. If you can convince them that you can go with de novo, so in this case, it will be de novo, or general case, it will be PMA. So if you can find anything, so this is if your product is so new, which is kind of completely groundbreaking stuff, completely new. Nobody heard about that. So in this case, the news is pretty much damning. So is it PMA or de novo? But if you find so kind of my best advice is try to find as something similar. So in this case, it will be much simpler. Probably it will be 510K, and it's much cheaper, much faster. And yeah, it's
excellent. Thank you.
But yeah, look at product code. Yeah, product code. It's.
So we have a bit of time left. I guess my next question would be on mentorship. Can you point out any mentors that you've had that have helped you along the way? What kind of people? And do you mentor at this stage in your career?
Yeah, I don't do regularly mentorship, but I mean, I mentor. Some people for sure from time to time. Actually, yeah, maybe. Actually, I can be open for mentorship for this group of people, but definitely you need a couple things here. I would say to get into that world, you need two people for sure. It needs to be some scientist advisor, obviously, and it definitely needs to be for somebody from a medical side because you need to learn a lot of things about medicine. So to get this advice is I would say mentorship. I need this good advisor. So you need to good people who understand that implications of technology into medical practice. But speaking of mentorship, definitely going into that stream, you need learn a lot about business. So definitely some business mentorship in general. It's very specific, but yeah, it's will be very helpful to have somebody on that side as well.
Excellent. So we are coming close to the top of the hour here. If there aren't any more